Picture a really reliable B+ student, right? Sitting in the back of a math class, just staring blankly out the window, completely ignoring the worksheet in front of them.
Right. And your very first thought is probably, well, they're just bored.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you think they have an attention deficit issue or something.
Oh, totally. That's the immediate assumption.
But what if that seemingly checked out kid is actually experiencing a massive system overloading panic attack right in front of you, and you're just like entirely missing the signs?
Because we do miss them constantly.
We do, and that's why, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a really eye-opening document called The Hidden Masks of Student Anxiety, a Georgia Schools Guide. It's published by MentalSpace School.
It's a fascinating read.
It really is. And the mission for you listening today, whether you're a parent trying to, decipher your kids' moods, or a teacher looking out at a classroom of 30 completely different personalities, or just someone fascinated by human behavior, the goal is to learn how to spot the invisible signs of distress in kids before they just completely spiral.
Because we operate under this massive collective delusion about what anxiety actually looks like.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, when society hears the word anxiety, we immediately apply the adult clinical definition to, like, a 10-year-old.
Right, which doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. We expect it to manifest as excessive fear or verbalized dread or those classic ruminating thoughts where someone actually tells you they're worried about their future.
Right, because an adult can sit down across from a friend or a therapist and just say, I'm experiencing a profound sense of dread regarding my career trajectory,
Yeah, they have the vocabulary for their internal state.
But expecting a child or even an adolescent to clearly articulate their anxiety, well, okay, let's unpack this. It's like asking someone to explain the plot of a doubly complex sci-fi movie using only a toddler's vocabulary.
That is such a perfect analogy.
They just do not have the words yet.
They don't.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is that the developmental brain science really grounds that analogy. I mean, children and adolescents literally possess less neurological real estate dedicated to the language of emotional states.
Right. The brain just isn't fully built yet.
Exactly. Their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for logical expression and emotional regulation, it's still under heavy construction. It is a work in progress.
So what happens to all that panic then?
Well, when a child experiences chronic stress, that energy doesn't just evaporate because they lack the vocabulary, right? It bypasses the verbal centers entirely.
Wow.
Yeah, it routes directly through their physical body and their behavior first.
So it bypasses the mouth and goes straight to the actions.
Precisely.
Which is why well-meaning adults constantly misread these biological distress signals. We just take a behavior at face value, completely missing the underlying translation.
And according to the guide, the first place adults usually notice a change isn't in a conversation about feelings.
No, it's in performance. It's what the source calls the academic illusion.
Right. A sudden academic dip or a loss of focus is almost universally the first red flag, primarily because school is where children are measured most consistently.
That makes sense.
You have that reliable student who suddenly starts missing assignments. They lose track of what the teacher's saying. They seem disorganized. And the immediate assumption from the adult world is often an attention issue.
Like ADHD.
Yes, exactly. We see a massive spike in adults suspecting ADHD when, in reality, the data indicates this is frequently anxiety masking itself as an attention deficit.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like we're diagnosing a car with a broken steering wheel like ADHD when actually the engine is just overheating from anxiety.
I love that, yes.
But how is an educator or a parent supposed to look at a kid zoning out in the back row and tell the difference without a medical degree?
Well, you really have to look at the underlying mechanism driving the behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, ADHD is fundamentally structural, right?
Yeah.
It relates to how the brain seeks and regulates dopamine.
Okay.
A student with ADHD might struggle to focus because their brain is understimulated and hunting for engagement. Anxiety, on the other hand, is a threat response state.
So it's a completely different driver.
Completely different. When a student is deeply anxious, their nervous system is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Their primal brain is convinced there is an immediate physical danger nearby.
Oh, wow.
You cannot focus on a math worksheet if your amygdala is screaming that there is a tiger in the room. The inattention isn't a lack of ability to focus, it's a hyperfocus on an invisible threat.
Wait, really? But if their brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline and they're frantically looking for this invisible tiger, why do they look zoned out?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah. Shouldn't they be bouncing off the walls, visibly panicked, or pacing the room?
That is the tricky part of the human nervous system. We always talk about fight or flight, but we frequently forget the third response, which is freeze.
Oh, right, the freeze response.
Exactly. When the perceived threat is overwhelming and there's no physical escape like, being stuck at a desk in a classroom, the nervous system can essentially hit the brakes to protect itself.
So they just shut down.
They dissociate, they stare out the window, they look completely numb. Internally, their mind is racing a million miles an hour, scanning social dynamics or worrying about a subtle change in the teacher's tone.
But externally, they look totally bored.
Precisely.
That reframes the entire concept of the lazy or distracted student. They aren't checked out at all. They are so overwhelmingly checked into every tiny stressor around them that their system just shuts down the outer display.
And that internal hyperactivity exhausts them. Operating a brain that's constantly flooded with stress hormones takes a massive amount of physical and mental energy.
I can only imagine.
So eventually, that overheating engine forces the student to alter how they navigate their world, which leads to the second hidden sign.
Right, the social fade out.
Yes. When the internal pressure becomes too great, the student starts trying to control their environment by shrinking it.
And the behavioral shifts detailed here are so subtle they could easily slip under the radar. We aren't talking about major dramatic outbursts.
No, not at all.
We're talking about a kid who, lived for the debate team suddenly deciding it's stupid and quitting, or a student stepping away from an established friend group.
They become unusually quiet in the lunchroom, or they actively isolate during recess.
Which is so common, but is this just normal, moody adolescence kicking in, or is it a genuine red flag? Because teenagers change their minds constantly.
They do. It's basically their job description.
Right. They decide playing soccer is suddenly uncool and switch to theater, or they naturally drift away from middle school friends. How do we tell the difference?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the direction of the movement. It's perfectly natural for a teenager to shift their passions as they figure out who they are.
Sure.
Dropping soccer to pick up the guitar is a lateral move. They're moving toward a new interest or a new community.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
But dropping passions to seek isolation, like quitting a team and then spending lunch hiding in the bathroom, that is a biological retreat.
Oh, wow.
They aren't exploring. It's the body's frantic attempt to reduce overwhelming sensory and social input.
They're turning down the volume on their life because the internal noise is just too loud.
Exactly.
But if a student pulls back academically and they pull back socially, they haven't actually solved the anxiety, have they? The pressure is still there.
The pressure is just trapped.
Mm.
And the mind might be trying to hide it, but the body eventually keeps the score. It inevitably manifests physically.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the third mask, the physical toll. The guide points out a highly specific timeline of physical complaints.
It's incredibly consistent.
Right. We're looking at chronic headaches that reliably happen Tuesday through Friday, but magically disappear on the weekends.
Yeah.
And stomach aches right before the school bus arrives, unexplained nausea, sleep disturbances.
These are somatic symptoms. The physical body is bearing the burden of the psychological distress. The emotional pain converts into physical pain.
For elementary kids in particular, the text highlights this very distinct pattern, the Sunday scaries.
Oh, yes. A very real phenomenon.
Where a child is perfectly fine on Saturday, but as Sunday afternoon rolls around, the anxiety steadily builds and peaks on Sunday night.
Like clockwork.
But if a kid says their stomach hurts, a parent's first instinct is to check for a fever, not an anxiety disorder. You wonder if the chicken was undercooked, right?
Of course.
How should a parent reframe their thinking when faced with a phantom Tuesday headache?
It requires a massive paradigm shift in how we view illness.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to treat physical symptoms as purely medical events caused by viruses. But the gut-brain connection is profoundly powerful, especially in children. The gastrointestinal tract relies on the same neurotransmitters, like serotonin, that the brain uses to regulate mood.
So the stomachache isn't just in their head.
Not at all. That stomachache on Sunday night is not a child faking it to get out of school. The gastrointestinal tract is literally cramping in response to the flood of stress hormones.
So the anticipation of returning to school triggers a physical defense mechanism.
Exactly. Parents need to start looking at the calendar as closely as they look at the thermometer. If the headaches vanish on Saturday morning and return with a vengeance on Tuesday, the pathogen isn't a virus.
The pathogen is the environment.
Exactly, or the internal pressure surrounding that environment.
Wow. So we have these three distinct masks: the academic illusion, the social fade out, and the physical toll. Now that we know how to decode these, what do the adults on the front lines actually do with this knowledge?
Because awareness without a protocol is just a different kind of anxiety for the adults, right? Action is where the trajectory actually changes.
Right. For teachers, the directive in the text is very clear. Notice the patterns, document them objectively, and refer warmly to the family.
And crucially, they must not try to diagnose.
Right. Why is diagnosing such a dangerous trap for an educator?
Because a teacher's role is observation and communication, not clinical evaluation. Saying to a parent, I noticed Johnny has been struggling to start his math worksheets, is factual and incredibly helpful.
Yeah, that feels collaborative.
Exactly, but saying, I think Johnny has generalized anxiety disorder crosses a professional boundary. It almost guarantees the family will become defensive and shut down.
And for the parents on the receiving end, the key is using non-triggering conversation openers tonight. The text contrasts a really bad approach with the recommended one.
Yes, the bluntly asking, are you anxious?
Exactly. If you just ask, are you anxious about school? That's a massive misstep.
It demands that the child possess the very vocabulary we've already established they don't have. They'll just shrug or say no.
Yeah. Instead, you should say something like, I noticed you've been a bit quiet at dinner lately. What's been weighing on you?
It's observational. It prevents defensiveness.
You're just inviting them to share a burden rather than demanding a diagnosis.
You're creating a safe container for their experience. But this raises an important question.
What's that?
If a parent and a teacher do everything right, they inevitably realize the student needs a professional evaluation. Are schools actually equipped to handle the wave of referrals they generate?
And that is the systemic chasm we fall into. Knowing the signs is practically useless if there is no operational lifeline when a student is actually drowning.
The traditional model of adolescent therapy is incredibly broken.
It really is. A working-class parent gets put on a 6-month wait list, and then the appointment is at 2:000 p.m. on a Tuesday. You have to leave work, lose pay, pull the kid out of school. The friction is so high.
Most kids just fall through the cracks, which bridges us directly to the systemic solution provided in the text. MentalSpace School.
Right. MentalSpace School provides K-12 same-day teletherapy specifically embedded within Georgia
This
schools.
is a game changer.
A parent or counselor calls, intake happens within 24 hours, and the student gets a dedicated therapist. The kid doesn't even leave campus.
And the structure of a dedicated therapist team is vital. They don't just contract out to a random call center.
Right.
They get a consistent group of culturally competent, licensed, diverse professionals who actually learn the specific culture, names, and rhythms of that exact school.
That builds trust instantly. And they offer so much crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention, staff wellness, family counseling, plus they are fully IPA and FERPA compliant.
Which is crucial for protecting medical and academic records.
But whenever we discuss systemic solutions, we hit a real-world constraint: cost.
Funding is always the ultimate barrier.
But the financial details here are amazing. With Georgia Medicaid, it is $0 out of pocket for the family. And they are in-network with Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, Aetna, United Healthcare, Humana, Peach State, CareSource, and Amerigroup.
By navigating that insurance labyrinth on the back end, they've removed the financial friction.
Exactly.
But there's another layer of friction pushing districts to adopt these models right now. It's legislative urgency. Let's ground ourselves in the present timeline. Today is May 7th, 2026.
Right.
The state of Georgia has passed House Bill 268, legally requiring districts to have operational mental health protocols in place.
And the deadline for HB 268 is July 2026. That is just 2 months away.
2 months. Districts are scrambling to comply. MentalSpace School steps in as the operational answer for these districts, and they back it up with hard data.
The stats are incredible. They cite 89% improved attendance, which proves that school refusal is linked to untreated anxiety.
Exactly.
They also show a 92% reduction in anxiety symptoms and an 85% family satisfaction rate.
It proves that the symptoms are solvable when you meet the child's behavioral cry for help with immediate, accessible clinical support.
To wrap up our deep dive today, let's bring it all back to the center. Student anxiety speaks through actions, not words.
Always.
Whether it's a sudden drop in grades, a quiet lunch period, or a Sunday night stomachache, you can learn more about all of this at mentalspaceschool.com.
The signs are always there, provided we are willing to learn the language.
So, my challenge to you listening today is to look at the students or children in your own life through this new lens of pattern matching rather than pathologizing.
I love that. And consider this, what if the very behaviors we most often punish in our schools, like sudden inattention or skipping class, are actually the exact moments a student is most desperately asking for help, but simply lacking the vocabulary to do so?